Hello and welcome everyone to Think Young Speaking Up for our Digital Future series. And this is the second live conversation, SME innovation and digital readiness to build back better. So this talk is part of our Thinkathon project. And if you don't know about it yet, just tune in on our social media to follow the great things that we are planning this year for the Thinkathon. So the COVID-19 pandemic, as we know, has hit SMEs, startups, and entrepreneurs really hard. And the digital adaptation has for many been, a shifting in their business models through resilience and innovation. And not everyone has had an easy time following suit. So to ensure that SMEs are not left behind and in the search to build back better, the policy and the regulation, they must boost the emergency response. So we need to really begin to looking forward and to look towards long-term sustainable change. This is why we are really happy to have here today five very special guests. So we have Jake Ward, President of the Connected Commerce Council. Hi, Jake.
Good morning.
Svetelina Penkova, who is a member of the European Parliament for the SND Group. Hello. Joaquin Wernberg, Research Director of Digitalization and Tech Policy at the Swedish Entrepreneurship Forum. Valeria Valotto, who is the Head of Public Affairs and Fundraising and Vice President at Projecto Quid, and who will be joining us a bit later. And finally, last but not least, Lindsay Pollard, who is Director of Little Box of Books. So to everyone watching, please send your questions and your comments in the comment section if you are watching on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube. And you can also live tweet the conversation on Twitter with the hashtag Thinkathon. So I would like to start with a couple of opening questions. And the first one will be for you, MEP Penkova. So SMEs account for 99% of the EU businesses and with over 24 million of SMEs across the EU. So in your opinion, how important are SMEs in 2021 and what do they bring to the EU?
Thank you for the question, Julia. So this is quite important indeed, and I think in the last 18 months we've seen the importance of the SMEs for our economy. Of course, you've said that they account as 99% of the EU business, but it's important to know what's the value they contribute actually to the EU economy. And by the latest data we have, it's more than 50%. It's about 56%. Is the SME's contribution to the EU economy, which you can see it's quite significant. In terms of the question, what do they bring? Of course, it could not be measured only in economic value. I think one of the most important aspects of what the small and medium sized businesses are critical to is to achieve our environmental sustainability. At least that's a field. The SMEs are quite active on the European landscape, and here this is of crucial importance, because if we look at the goals set by the EU and by every different countries, we see that there are two main priorities at the moment. One is the green transformation, and the other one is the digitalization, or the so-called technological transformation. Both those aspects are quite easily, and I can say for a fact, most probably, that they're driven by the SME sector. So they have crucial importance for us to be able to achieve those goals that we have set ahead of us, and to be able to follow our priorities, at least for the next 10 years. I think together with that, the SMEs are also helping us to achieve a more resilient and diverse economy. But to have like a few final words and to summarize in three main aspects what the SMEs industry brings to the EU, I would say the first and most important one would be probably boosting competition and creating more sustainable and resilient economic growth. That would be the first aspect I would like to emphasize, which also in its matter includes providing employment and being more adaptable and flexible in unprecedented situations and crisis situations as the one we've seen recently. And third is their value added in boosting innovation and technological development, because they're the generator of the new invention, innovation, and the technological development which we see in Europe and which we need so actively in the last 18 months, because our life basically had moved online in terms of studying, work. So what the small businesses could offer us in terms of innovation and technological development had become crucial for us to be able to do our everyday activities.
Thank you very much for this first thoughts and answer. Um, Lindsay, I would like to ask you the second question. So, SMEs have really faced the biggest hit because of the pandemic, as you know. And in two separate research projects, both from SME United, but also from the Connected Commerce Council, these research actually report that over 90% of European SMEs saw a huge decrease in turnover during the pandemic. So, as an entrepreneur yourself, how has the COVID-19 pandemic affected the little box of books?
Hello, Julia. Thank you for this question. We are one of the lucky few. We're in that tiny percentage which has done all right during the pandemic, because we sell inclusive and representative children's storybooks to schools and to families. So I think for us, we had everybody was homeschooling. Parents were for the very first time really involved in their kids' education. So all schools were closed, and so at that point, parents were taking much more of an interest in what their children were learning. And so from a homeschooling point of view, our business tripled overnight as the pandemic hit, and then continued throughout. And because we sell books that reflect the diversity of race and culture and family setup, and we find all the books from the top publishers and put them together for schools and families, during last year's, when George Floyd was killed, and the ripples that affected the whole world, there was a real social movement globally. And because of the nature of our business and where we are positioned, I think due to the pandemic as well, there was a lot of reflection from families and from schools, and people recognizing that their bookshelves needed to reflect the diversity of our population in order to create, it's not children's books aren't the answer to everything, but they're a bedrock of a cohesive society. So certainly for us, we've continued to grow. And so for us, the challenges were very much like, how do you manage overnight growth? And at that point, planning and funding and making sure that everything was in place, especially during a pandemic when goods don't flow very well, and it's incredibly hard to find the people you need to fulfill what you're trying to do. So for us, we've thrived, and I think we are one of the sectors that is doing all right. I think books generally did pretty well during the pandemic.
Thank you, Lindsay. I agree with you. I think books were one of the main things that people were, continue buying and consuming also during the pandemic. So it's really great. And I was looking at your Instagram page. I was really impressed. So I was wondering if it was only for children, or if younger people could also be involved.
Well, I mean, everybody learns something, don't they? I think the thing is, as well, is I think the last year has really shown where people have blind spots, and sometimes children's books explain things in the most simple ways, and we teach teachers how to explain some more difficult subjects, to tackle social justice with their pupils. So we kind of do everything for everyone. But yeah, at the moment, the books are concentrated on 0 to 11-year-olds, but everyone can gain something from them.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. I would like us to continue this conversation around the topic of young entrepreneurs. And my next question will be for you, Joachim. So entrepreneurship is on the rise, and we see young people actually beginning to look beyond, more traditional job sector, and they are taking really their career into their own hands. So today, young generation are more, entrepreneurial than any generation before. And why do you think that entrepreneurship is on the rise? And what benefit also can these young entrepreneurs in particular bring to Europe, in your opinion?
So I'd like to start by taking a step back and saying that I think it's great that we're discussing SMEs. I think it's important, our experience from looking at research and statistics, most recently a survey among some 4,500 SMEs in Sweden, we see a recurring picture that SMEs are both the leaders and the laggards of the digital transformation. So the greatest majority of them are not necessarily growth-oriented. They're not necessarily innovative or changing their business model, and they have quite small margins. So in terms of handling the digital transformation and the pandemic, they're actually in quite a lot of trouble still. I'd just like to have that with us in the discussion. Moving on to the smaller part, but the oh so important part of SMEs, the startups and the entrepreneurs and the innovators. I believe that, well, this generation of entrepreneurs have seen an earlier generation that have pioneered a digital transformation across the world on a global scale. And they have quite a lot of role models to take impression from. I believe that's one driving factor for sure. They can see that, and this is also mirrored in research, that the firms that are most successful in leveraging new technologies are not the established ones, but small new ventures where you can organize the way you work and processes around the new technology to fully use its potential. So all of the tools they need are there, and they don't need to invest in any physical capital, right? They can buy stuff like cloud services. Most of what they need in terms of capacity is on an as-a-service availability. So they have all of those possibilities. And I also think there's another part that we underestimate, and that's the fact that you can become an entrepreneur today without having a 20-year plan of how to grow your business. You can become an entrepreneur with the explicit aim of being acquired. That's becoming a widely spread exit option for entrepreneurs and innovators. This means that we could, in the long term, get serial entrepreneurs or a larger amount of serial entrepreneurs and innovators in Europe. And I think that would be a great thing.
Thank you very much. Lindsay, I would like to come back to you. So you began Little Box of Books back in 2018. And the process of really starting your own business, that must have been, really nerve-wracking and stressful for you. And this is the case for many young entrepreneurs, so there are so many risks involved in taking this huge leap, building your own business, and there's also a fear of uncertainty and failure. So tell us a bit more about your experience, and maybe if you have some advice that you would like to give to young entrepreneur or young people who would like to be entrepreneur and who are looking to follow your footsteps.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that got me through, especially those early days where you're literally doing everything and thinking of everything and being the marketer, the web person, the product developer, is a belief in what you're going to create and a belief in the difference or the solution it provides. And I think that starting with that and really kind of really crystallizing that so you're passionate enough, and passion's not the only thing that's going to keep you going. You need money, so knowing where your first investment's coming from. We were in a privileged position where I had a close family member who invested in us, but that's key to it. Like, this is where the diversity of entrepreneurship comes into it. It's like people who have access to funds can start small businesses, and I was one of those people who had it, who had access to it. And I'd say right from the beginning, and I'm not a tech entrepreneur, I'm not a tech startup, so but I think this applies right across the board, is keep your product as simple as possible, in that don't offer multiple varieties. You've got to get a simple, viable product, and you've got to get it out there, and you've got to start selling. Because the longer you sit at home going, I'm going to start a business, the less likely you are to ever start the business. So and if you sit there thinking about the risks and how terribly wrong it could go, you will also just sit there and never move, because I mean, it's a ridiculous thing to do. Quite often you're just stepping into thin air. And so for us, definitely we went straight out. I had a Sky interview on the first day I launched, totally by accident. So I was interviewed by Sky News, and we started big, and we went, and like, we always behaved as if we were bigger than we were. So we aimed for big celebrities to support us. We aimed for big interviews, big publicity, and it's really kind of carried us through. And I think quite often you sit there thinking, oh, nobody's going to be bothered about my little business, but very much your attitude has to be one that I've got a solution, and this can make the difference in some people's lives. It is a solution. And I think if you've got that, if you have that, and you have something that people will want, then you have to behave like that, and you have to enter those spaces and get those resources so to make your dream work. But it is literally the longest working hours that I've ever done. It's the longest, most, I probably, you work on minimum wage for a very long time, especially if you're not one of those tech startups. But if you're providing a solution and you're growing, and it's an incredible way to, make your money and set up a business. I love it.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. And now let's continue this conversation around the topic of digital tools and how they can also help the SMEs. So to the people watching also on social media, don't forget to send your questions in the comments, and we will share them with us and the rest of the speakers at the end of the talk, so we can continue this chat all together. So my next question will be for you, Jake. As I was saying, digitalization has offered many opportunities to businesses across the world. So helping them, for example, optimizing finance, improving productivities, expanding also to new markets. But even before this onset and the pandemic, SMEs lagged behind the digital transition. How is the case? Can you tell us a bit more?
I think there's a lot of things going on there, actually. Lindsay just sort of touched on one of them, which is that the core of your business has to be the focus of your energy. And when you don't have access to capital, you have to find ways to efficiently take a product to market, or find your audience, or even just build the infrastructure of your business. Digital tools in this world that we live in now, whether it's software as a service or sort of off the rack services, email clients, web services, cloud, payments, platforms, all of those different tools that have been built frequently by the larger technology providers enable small businesses to start faster, start cheaper, scale more effectively, and create security around what they're building without having to become experts, right? We call that the small stack. It's the IT offerings of a collective that provide infrastructure for a lot of small businesses. But as we know, most small businesses aren't trying to be acquired by Google. They're not trying to take over the world. They're trying to build independence and to have a sustainable revenue stream, serve their community, serve their customers, provide value to their family. The biggest obstacle for adoption then becomes apathy, right? If things are working well enough, the margin is there, and you're not trying for titanic growth, then all you need to do is maintain. The challenge then is when there is an economic downturn, when there is some sort of natural disaster or a global pandemic, there is no margin, there is no flexibility, there's no agility to respond to that challenge. So the divide that we saw between those small businesses that either were digitally native, were conceived and brought to market with this infrastructure in place, versus those businesses that were started sort of pre-adoption and didn't see the need, thought that it was too hard, thought it was going to take too much time to invest in it. A lot of them didn't make it, whereas businesses like Lindsay's took off like a shot, right? Because it was conceived in this digital age where you could be bigger than you were and then grow into that infrastructure. I want to follow up on one thing that Lindsay said real quick. The failure, whether you're a startup or just a small business, the fear of failure is not the challenge. The fear is that you're right and you fail. We're okay being wrong, right? We're okay getting it wrong. We are not okay getting it right and still not succeeding. That's the hardest thing, is you just keep grinding at it because you're sure that what you're doing is the right solution.
Thank you so much. MEP Penkova, so many SMEs vary in their ability to adapt digitally, and we are seeing indeed an ever growing digital divide among SMEs. So what step can be taken to ensure that the digital divide between SMEs is not exacerbated, in your opinion?
Thanks, Julia. I think Jake and Liz have already given a few examples on that matter and how the difficulties in terms of succeeding and surviving in this environment could be depending on which side of the or which stage, more correctly, of the digitalization process an SME is, because there are a lot of success examples, and as I think all of us said and agreed in the beginning, the SMEs are the driver of this technological transformation. But this doesn't mean that everyone is at the same stage of improving and using the tools of digitalization to the best sense possible. So I would probably emphasize on two factors here that could help the SMEs in that matter. First of all, the government, speaking about the EU, but I'm pretty sure this apply for other countries as well, given that we have speakers representing them, should be thinking a bit more about the subsidies for SME sector, especially when it comes to helping them to have access to the digital tools that are available or to the new technologies. So government should be quite active on that matter. This would be the first step. And the second bit is when we speak about digitalization, we also have to take into account the different levels of digital skills people have. And here, by trying to improve that and putting a bit more funding into that, a bit more programs into educating and kind of improving the digital skills of the society is not applicable and helpful only for the SME sector, but for the whole economy, because we've seen that this transformation, it could be easy for certain generations, but it's not necessarily that easy for everyone who is an active participant in the business environment, in the government, in the economy as a whole. So I think those are the two main aspects where the regulators should be thinking about how to boost the subsidies in terms of the national governments to help SMEs have access to more digital tools and new technologies, and what are the steps in terms of setting the right priorities and programs and funding to improve the digital skills of the society in general. Like here we can speak about schools, kindergarten, universities, where this should be a very strong emphasis to have those people prepare for the working environment, to be kind of moving as fast as the technological development currently. So I think those are the two main aspects. And thirdly, because I know as a representative of the regulatory side, you probably expect for me to say something what the regulators should be doing, not only the government and the people. I think it's one of our main objectives should be to set up the correct and fair rules, which would help us to create the right competitive landscape, which at the same time protects the SMEs, but gives them enough flexibility to grow and innovate. So this is something which is one of the main discussions in a few of the committees within the European Parliament I'm a member of course, the European Commissions, but the European Commission, but of course, safeguarding the level playing field, which grants fair competition for the SMEs. And here I'm speaking, of course, specifically about the EU, but this applies to everyone, I guess.
Thank you very much. And this actually leads me to my next question that I would like to ask to you, Joachim. So we've seen that in response to the crisis, many SMEs have also been able, to unlock opportunities thanks to the digital revolution and everything that the digital world has to offer. So, what effect do you think the digital revolution will have on the future of SMEs?
Thank you. I think that we saw a lot of headlines during the early months of the pandemic, or the first half year, where the conclusion was that the pandemic is going to drive a digital shift throughout society, and especially in SMEs. I think that's both true and not true, building on what Jake said before about margins. We also tested this for SMEs in Sweden. What we see is what they're doing right now is something we can call digital transformation out of necessity. They're trying to stay alive, but they're not doing digitalization or digital transformation to grab an opportunity, to get a competitive advantage in their markets. They don't have the flexibility to do that right now. So I want to echo what MEP Penkova said. I think we need incentives for these firms to experiment with new technologies. We need to lower the thresholds. But I also want to give a warning related to this. I think that when we see, if you look at policies enacted throughout the world to promote digital skills or digital transformation in firms, you tend to pick winners. You tend to pick what type of skills people should learn or what type of technologies they should pick up. And implicitly, you tend to think that every firm that gets a 3D printer will become a better firm from a digital perspective. And that's simply just not true. So we need to find ways to promote experimentation, the use of various combinations of technologies by different firms. And we will have a failure rate here as well, but we need that. So I don't have all the answers, but I think that's a key part to bring into the equation. And finally, I think we also have a part of the solution already, which are the firms known as big tech, which are all other than SMEs. But many of them have established platforms that in many ways allow us to get access to a more internal market than we had before big tech. So for all the debate about them, I think it's extremely important in the regulatory debate with the DMA and the DSA proposals right now that we vanguard or we safeguard the platform economy that allows SMEs to get access to a better internal market. And then that we get the SMEs on that market. Thank you.
Julia, can I jump in on the end of that real quick?
Yeah.
I think Joaquin's point is great. Right? It's one of the real challenges. One of the recommendations that the Connected Commerce Council made at the end of its research effort in the U.S. and again in Europe in the past month or so is this idea of lowering the barrier to entry for small businesses and startups, about digitization out of opportunity rather than necessity. There's no question that a crisis moves us further down the road faster. We've been talking about the digital transformation for 15 years, and it happened in 15 months because of necessity. That being said, we can't be prescriptive about this. We can't tell people they need better advertising or they need to create CRMs or different website patterns. Certainly, trade associations, policymakers, regulators, and academics should not be making those decisions. What we should do is find ways to foster public and private partnerships through money and through incentives, but also through a safe environment where those two groups that often are at each other's throats, particularly in Europe, can have a conversation about choice, right? Enabling small businesses to choose which tools and services best fit their need. We do a lot of events where we help people assess their current state of need in terms of their business. And I always ask, what's the thing you hate doing most? Is it bookkeeping? Is it finding new audience? Is it delivering value? What is it that you hate doing most? Fix that, automate that, invest time and energy in fixing that so you don't have to steer into it into the future. And most importantly, take advantage of what's already there. There's no question that a fair, level playing field is critical and that it is important for policymakers at the EU level as well as the national level to continue to monitor the relationship between big tech and the rest of the marketplace. But if you'll allow, I had a conversation 5 or 6 years ago with a high-ranking policymaker in Brussels about how the United States had been able to drive forward small business growth and startup growth after the '08 crash, and that out of that crisis came this investment of capital, came this entrepreneurial talent. And he said, what can the EU do? What can we do as regulators to spur that kind of growth in Europe? And I said, is it possible you could just do nothing? And he said, no, birds got to fly. Regulators are going to regulate. So that's where we find ourselves today.
Thanks, Jake. And once you were talking, I saw that Valeria just joined us. So hi, Valeria, and welcome to the talk. It's great to see you. So you are the head of
Hi,
affairs and
hello.
fundraising and vice president also at Progetto Quid. So actually, could you tell us a bit more about what is Progetto Quid? And I hope I pronounce it well, but you would explain us a bit better. And also how you have adapted digitally during the pandemic and why also you chose to go digital, because I understood that this is a big part of also your strategy. So the floor is yours.
Hi, Julia. Hi, everyone, and thank you for having me here. I hope you can hear me okay. I'm in an IKEA store because I was visiting a client this morning. We have a press day for a new product we've just launched. So I'm in one of those IKEA hubs. You can see it's Progetto Quid. Let's start from here. Why I'm at IKEA? We are a social enterprise, a rather young social enterprise. I know this is hilarious. We are a young social enterprise, a women-led social enterprise, and we have a fashion brand, fashion and design brand, called Progetto Quid. So Quid is the name of the organization, Progetto Quid of the brand, and we are a brand on a mission to redesign made in Italy fashion in order to reimagine Italy's labor market, to make it more inclusive, and especially more inclusive for women who are most discriminated against on the local market, unfortunately.
I think we lost Valeria, unfortunately. Um, we can give her maybe 2 minutes to reconnect, and maybe in the meantime.
Hey, here I am. Can you see me now?
All good. We can
Okay,
see. We can
perfect.
hear you. Welcome back.
You can see me. So when the pandemic hit, we had to close all of our 10 stores. We distribute our products in 10 stores. And also we saw the B2B sales plummeting. So B2B operations we have with brands like IKEA. What we had to do was to reconvert our business as quickly as possible. And we did so, converting to reusable face masks, so sustainable face masks. But this meant entering in a completely new product into completely different processes. And also, we had a threefold challenge. It was we had to sell digitally, so we had to strengthen our e-commerce. E-commerce sales increased by 400% in under 1 month. We had to digitalize processes because we were working from remote. And we had to find a way to monitor this new production, this new process, the new life cycle of the sustainable face masks. And finally, we have a social mission, and we had to transfer digitally all of our welfare programs. So we worked to transform and to go digital, but it was for the better. As a small social enterprise, SME, let's say, definitely the digital transformation made us more resilient and more sustainable in many ways. We were able to use time more efficiently, to use transport more efficiently, and also to support our staff more efficiently than we were doing before. So it's been a journey, but it's been definitely a positive one.
Thank you so much, Valeria, for sharing this inspiring story and experience with us. I would like to suggest that maybe we can continue this conversation around the European SME strategy and the need to build back better, because this is also a term that we hear a lot, that we see a lot. So what does it mean concretely? And I would like to go back to you, Jake, with a question. So just before the onset of the pandemic, the European Commission, as you know, released the SME strategy. But efforts are not really been made to update this strategy since COVID-19. So people are actually calling for a focus on innovation and market access, the removal also of bureaucracy, and the alignment of, an updated strategy with wider policy framework, such as the European Green Deal. So, in your opinion, is the EU failing to take these key steps?
I'm not sure that I'd say the EU is failing to take key steps. I think historically the EU has failed to understand how markets on a national level are reflected in the full EU's economy, that the attitudes and business models that are successful in Germany don't necessarily translate to Bulgaria, and that there's different ways of approaching this from a regulatory standpoint that isn't necessarily best served at a federated level. I would say that there are every entrepreneur, every small business owner and operator has a unique story, right? What brought them there, why they do it, what is the experience they're having on a day-to-day basis. Likewise, they all have a universal experience in terms of perseverance, independence, not wanting to work for other people, feeling good about the value they provide to their customers and their employees, and that there should be, from a policy standpoint, a recognition that there is something visceral about this. It's not just access to markets, it's the ability to compete in any market, right? Which requires a more scalable solution, which you can't achieve without larger companies. You can't incentivize people to start businesses as if it were easy. That it is hard is half the point. If it were easy, there would be more of them, but they wouldn't be any good, right? There is a natural filtering process that happens because this is hard, because we are stepping off a cliff into thin air. And that is core to being what we call the tip of the spear, right? The thing that drives economic growth, that drives innovation, that drives our building back better is going to be that there is a natural selection process for those men and women able to take the leap and drive forward. I think anything the EU and regulators generally can do to support that, lower the barrier to entry from an education standpoint, lower the barrier to entry from a capital standpoint, and get out of the way, and that will lead to success.
Thanks, Jade. Let's continue the conversation around policy, and to our audience watching us live on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube, please continue to send us your questions. So we will open the floor also to the question on social media very soon, so you can continue interacting with our speaker. I have a question for you, Emily Bankova. So the pandemic has really shocked this system like never before, and it really acted as a kind of stress test on SME and entrepreneurship regulatory framework. So there is really a need to become more resilient. What key element do you believe need to be changed and adapt as regards to policy in that matter?
I'll start actually by using something that Jake had just said. That one of the problems in the EU, it is quite different. The business environment works in different countries. And that's actually the actual situation. So I'm going to divide my answer into two parts. On the first side would be what should be done from the national perspective. And the second part is what should be done on an EU level, because it's a bit of a different approach here. So I think on a national level, the national authorities and like society definitely understands that the SMEs are a crucial part of the business ecosystem. So that's no questions to be asked there. So in terms of what the national authorities should be doing is they they need to provide the right knowledge, the right skills, the financial regulation and the business opportunities in order to foster the SMEs environment. I think more or less we've touched upon all of those aspects already in our conversations by giving different examples from the business and from the regulatory aspect. So what I'm saying that on national level, the national authorities would definitely be able to make the more tailored regulatory framework, because they should be able to understand the business environment in each specific country better. I'm for more tailored approach on a country level basis, even within the EU. In terms of the EU level and what should be done there, so of course, being in the common union, we shouldn't be excluding the fact that there is a need of more broader regulatory framework that would probably help the functioning of the industry on a EU-wide level. So here we're speaking about promoting technological, organizational, and financial transition. And I mean, I know those are very nice words to say, but what we actually mean in terms of what the EU should be doing, first of all, in terms of policy, strategies, and funding, the EU should provide liquidity to support the European SMEs. That's one of the most important. That's one of the most important bits, especially now in the COVID-19 pandemic. Second, reducing the regulatory burden and improving the market access and the connectivity between the SMEs from the various countries. That's another goal that the EU as a regulator should be having in front. Third, we've already spoken about that, and it's more related to the second point, is creating fair rules that are upholding a fair and competitive market environment, boosting innovation, but at the same time protecting the consumers. And why am I saying that? To go to my last remark here is one of the main goals of the EU would be to retain and restore the trust among the consumers in the SME sector, because as a younger generation, we've seen the benefits, and we definitely, I would say, we definitely support the development of the SME sector. But in the current crisis, we've seen a lot of fraud coming, especially in the online space, and it's not necessarily coming from the big companies, but some small fraud companies who are taking the advantage of the situation. So there's been a bit of a problem in the perception of the consumers here. So having a proper regulatory framework which ensures the fair competitive environment for the small and medium businesses, but at the same time protecting consumers, to return their trust and to make them a proper users of the products or the technologies SMEs are offering, is also quite important for us as a regulator, and it's quite challenging at the moment.
Thank you very much. Back to you, Valeria. I was wondering, from the perspective of a SME, do you think that the EU has done enough to support your business resilience and recovery from the COVID-19 crisis? And what else do you believe they can do from your perspective, but also your experience as you were explaining? I cannot hear you.
It's a rather challenging one. So far,
Yes,
can you hear
now we
me?
can hear you well.
Yes, you can. Fantastic. Okay. So it's a rather challenging one. There have been a lot of promises. There have been a lot of plans. So we are very curious to see how these are going to unfold. So I guess the answer will be with us in a few months or a few years, then, when we will be able to gauge the impact of the measures that have been approved. But so far, what to negotiate the will and the wish to show solidarity and the collaborative spirit that has pervaded the union this has made us more resilient, definitely, to feel that we are one, one and unite that collective of the worst hit areas in the pandemic in Europe. We've felt close in the distance to institutions, and we hope that this journey might continue together.
Thank you so much, Valeria. And now I think it's time for the questions from the audience. So if the team at the back can maybe show on the screen the very first question for the speakers. Okay, so we have a question here from Georgina Cooper. So as an SME, one are taking the steps to remain innovative by leveraging new technologies, but we are finding it hard to ensure that it does not create a negative environmental impact. So what is being done to support SMEs in regard to these conflicts? Maybe I can give this question to MEP Penkova, and if someone else wants to jump in, and Jake after? Okay, perfect. Let's do that order then. MEP Penkova, do you want to answer that, or shall we?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Yeah, of course, it's interesting because I said that the SMEs are one of the drivers to achieve that green transformation. So here the question is more or less stating the opposite, which makes it a bit difficult for me to answer. But in terms of what's being done to support the MEPs in that matter, it would be definitely probably developing some practical guidelines which would help them measure the environmental impact and how to reduce that, because this is definitely going to be part of the regulations going onwards. So if there is not enough information, us as regulator, we should take note in terms of what's coming up in the pipeline, in terms of the regulatory framework, to give a bit more heads up so the SMEs know how to properly invest in that and not be caught up in crossing specific regulations in a few years' time. So I would say it's like from our side would be providing more information about what's coming up in terms of guidelines. But I think we've been quite voicey in the EU in terms of what are our climate goals, and like the fact that the Green Deal and then reducing the impact on the environment in any aspect of our life is our main priority. So that's everything I would be able to say to that question, because my statement was opposite at the beginning.
Thanks, Jake. Do you want to go ahead?
I think you can do both. I don't think it was opposite. I don't think those things are mutually exclusive. SMEs can and should be building toward sustainability, toward an environmentally conscious footprint, certainly. But there is also an opportunity at a national and federated level to incentivize larger companies. Here's an instance where I'm actually advocating for larger regulation, where you can incentivize a more conscientious approach to environmental impact, and in doing so create a market differentiator for which partners SMEs are going to level up to in vertical integration. If one cloud computing company, it doesn't have a neutral footprint and another does, we should incentivize SMEs to be using the less harmful option. And the more we can incentivize those that framework and those market drivers, the more success we're going to have.
Joachim, I saw that you were raising your hand as well.
Yes, just a quick point to add. I think this is in a way an excellent example of what I tried to describe earlier, that companies using new technologies need to experiment. So you should expect in terms of if not environmental impact, I mean, let's speak more generally about efficiency. You should expect that during the transition, your efficiency is not going to improve linearly or exponentially. You will have to try and fail a few times. and then try to find the steering metrics for increasing your efficiency or your environmental impact using new technologies. So the path is not going to be, straightly improving. You're going to have to wind up in the wrong places a few times. I think that's important to remember, because we can't regulate or steer from the beginning to know exactly how new technologies are going to benefit us. I think the electric scooters in cities all over Europe and the world are an excellent example of this. To start with, all the surveys that were done about them, all the studies show that they're not environmentally efficient. And now they're starting to become environmentally efficient. And that's because innovation is an ongoing process. There's a great historian of technology, Nathan Rosenberg, that said that we need to learn by using. We need to implement new technologies into the economy and society and then improve them.
Thank you so much, Joachim. Next question, please. So the second question is from Ulfet Emper. Question for the panel: what technologies, digital tools are having the biggest impact? What tools should business be taking advantage of? And maybe I'd like to ask this question to Lindsay first, based on your experience.
Hello. For the broader answer, I think I'd have to turn to people who kind of deal with this in an umbrella fashion. But I think what has to be remembered when you're face first in your business and you're developing it is that, especially if you're I do it on my own. It's a matter of time and how you spend your time and if something's going to be immediately efficient. So we can talk about digital tools, but they have to be easy to be picked up and they have to be beneficial pretty quickly. Like I've got a team of 5 of us now. There's 5 of us, and it's simple things like we're using Microsoft Teams, but some of them, and it's part of a government kickstart scheme. So we've got interns who are so it's a kind of COVID kind of bringing people and giving people the opportunity for employment. So these are people who haven't used technologies at all, and we're using Microsoft Teams and as a starting point, and it has to be something that's immediately pickable. There's clear training, and that it can be implemented very quickly and to the most efficiency. Because what we find quite often with digital tools, when you're so busy, is that when any complexity at all hits and somebody interprets something slightly differently to someone else, it impacts you on a bigger scale very quickly. So it's like, so as we think about like what digital tools we use, like we keep it very, like I kept it very simple because I just did not have the capacity to be using things that would improve my efficiency, because I need someone to sit down and go, this will save you 10 hours a week. Then I'm in definitely then. But it's trying to find those ones that are going to create those efficiencies and enable me to keep pedaling and keep going. And especially in a pandemic, especially when you can see businesses failing left, right, and center. You're homeschooling as well as running your business, time's short. So whatever tools are recommended, I mean, I'd love to hear new recommendations, to hear from people who work in this field to what are the things that kind of really do create those efficiencies.
Thanks, Lindsay. Anyone else on this question?
Only to echo what I said before, Julia, which is that the tools are the ones that solve your biggest problem. Now, whether it's inefficiency or reaching a new audience or communicating with your teams, identify what that is, solve for that problem. And to say that Lindsay's 100% right. If it doesn't work in the first 20 minutes, nobody's going to use it. Right? It has to be intuitive. It has to be scalable. And that's why, frankly, larger technology companies have been able to solve for this, because they have massive R&D programs and huge audiences to test on. But there's also a remarkably disruptive startup ecosystem around these tools that can and does evolve more rapidly than the larger platforms. Zoom being a perfect example. It's a 14-year-old company that most people had never heard of, but now is the same brand recognition as Kleenex, right? It is the way that we communicate in a crisis. They didn't do anything different. They evolved rapidly from where they had been for more than a decade, and the proof is in the product.
Thanks. Valeria, I don't know if you'd like to share some thoughts on this question, since also your company is using digital tools, and I know that it's playing an important part. So if you want to add on this, the floor is yours.
So from our point of view, as a little digitalized fashion brand, what we found incredibly helpful and what we were able to strengthen during the COVID period was definitely, I will say something very trivial, social media and e-commerce in our case. But we are a consumer brand with a rather artisan feel and a rather young not-for-profit social enterprise. So this is our experience. But even if it sounds quite trivial, in fact, it was a big transformation for us.
Thank you, Valeria. I hope I didn't cut you because that was a bit frozen at the end, but hopefully it's it's okay. I think we have time for a last question from the audience. So if we can have it on the screen. So the last question will be from Charles Howard. So hi, Charles. The policymakers, and the question is, how can policymakers ensure the right regulatory framework are put in place to allow digitally advanced SMEs to continue to adapt, but also to assist less well adapted SMEs with the required training and tools? Joachim, maybe? Yep. Go ahead.
This is an excellent question, and I just want to echo what I think both Mark and I have already said, that the regulatory framework needs to not pick what skills we're going to learn or what technologies we're going to adopt. It needs to be, for instance, there is an exemption, a tax exemption in Sweden for hiring R&D personnel. There's been a discussion about expanding that to hire people working in a more broadly defined area of digitalization. That would be one way of enabling or lowering the threshold or creating incentives for a wide variety of different types of digital transformation activities that would apply both to advanced and less advanced SMEs. I think that should be a key to such regulatory work, that we shouldn't tell them what to do. We should give them the means to do it themselves.
Thank you so much. Jake, very briefly, do you want to add anything?
Oh, sorry, Jake, not Mark.
No,
My
it's
mistake.
Okay. They can't. The answer is they can't. Policymakers, first off, there's no way to ensure that the regulatory framework will allow or advance or even successfully promote. And there's certainly no way to ensure that a policymaker-led activity will achieve those things. Governments collect money and give money to things in order to prioritize activity. They create laws to ban bad behaviors. Other than that, what we need to do is understand and reflect the society that we are governing. In this instance, that means being adaptive. One of the EU's greatest sort of governmental successes is GDPR, almost in spite of itself, right? It took too long. It didn't have enough input. It wasn't quite right. And then it shifted the entire world appropriately to this new first principle of privacy as a right. You can't do the same thing when it comes to the spirit of entrepreneurialism or even free markets. That's just not how they work. There's no history in the world that says that that's how markets work. But in an instance where markets are moving this quickly and innovation is speeding up the cycles of government are getting even slower. And so we have to be more predictive rather than creating opportunity. We have to allow for opportunity.
Thank you very much. And before we close this conversation, I would like to give you each 30 seconds, not more, to say your final points. So let's start with you, Lindsay.
So I think, like, speaking to those people who are thinking about setting up their businesses, I think if you've got a solution, if you want to make an impact, then business is a perfect opportunity to do that. So to work up what you think you can make a difference and how you can make a difference, and find that funding that you need, and go for it. Because while we can talk about this entrepreneurial spirit that everybody's talking about, it can make a difference. And together, lots of little companies choosing to find solutions to change lots of little problems can make a huge difference in society. So for me, I would be fully encouraging anyone who's just sitting there thinking about whether they should set up a business, whether the entrepreneurial route's for them. I'd say, like, go for it, find your solution and really go for it.
Thank you. Valeria, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, I will go ahead, and from the point of view of social enterprises and not for social enterprises and not for profit social enterprises, it's definitely a challenge to become digital and to keep up with the pace of digital transformation, but it's a challenge. It's definitely worth it. So we need more resources and more capacity building, more partnership between profit and non-for-profit businesses, especially in the tech world, to make social entrepreneurship and social change a digital change too. That's it.
Thank you. MEP Penkova?
Thanks, Julia. So I think we've all agreed that the SMEs play a major role in the European economy, and they're definitely the driver of the digital and the green sustainable transition. So therefore, they have to be the center of any future regulatory framework that we're putting in place.
Thank you. Joachim?
In the spirit of promoting entrepreneurial activities, I'd just say that don't think too much about the digital technologies. Just experiment with them, and like Jake said, if it doesn't work in the first 20 minutes, try something else.
Thank you. And last but not least, Jake?
I would just say thank you and for hosting this, and that as long as there are smart, well-intended policymakers like MEP Pankova and heroes of small businesses and entrepreneurial spirit coming together to have conversations like this, there's a pretty good chance we'll get this right. That more of these conversations at a national and EU level need to happen on a more regular basis. In the US and in Europe, the same thing happens, where a lot of people talk about small businesses, but almost nobody speaks to small businesses. And we need that conversation to happen on a recurring basis.
Thank you so much. You've been amazing, and you've done a really great job in wrapping up the conversation. So I just have to say thank you again for participating, exchanging these ideas together, but also thank you to our audience and people following the project in general. If you want to be in touch with our upcoming webinars, but also follow Think Young projects, just make sure that you follow us on social media, that you tag us, and you can also use the hashtag Thinkathon to continue the conversation with the project and the speakers. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening. Have a good day for those watching us in the US. And
thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.